Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. Today I'm talking about some Kino releases. I've got a bunch of stuff here. So one 4K and some action movies and some more stuff. So let's get into this. I will start with an old favorite. This is 3 Days of the Condor. It is from 1975. Directed by the great late Sidney Pollack, starring Robert Redford, Faye Dunaway, a very iconic, for me anyway, Max von Sydow, as well as Cliff Robertson and some other recognizable faces. A very intriguing spy movie. This is, as I said, a 4K, shot by the great Owen Roizman, who was really rocking it in the 70s and, shot Network and just a ton of other stuff. Became one of Sidney Pollack's go-to guys, and I think is a little bit underrated as a DP. Gordon Willis gets a lot of love, rightfully so, but Owen Roizman could really shoot a good-looking movie. So he is definitely part of the reason that I enjoy this film. And this film is part of a cycle of movies that was happening in the 70s, a bunch of paranoid thrillers. And I've talked about these on the channel before, specifically when Marathon Man came out. That was a 4K from Kino. That's part of this. And I keep coming back to things like Clute, Parallax View, All the President's Men, the Pakula films, All the President's Men, also starring Redford, obviously. But yeah, it's a really great genre that sprung up in the 70s. There's a lot of great films there, and this is one of them. I was weirdly obsessed with this film in college, and it was a regular in my staff pick section at the video store I worked at. I was really intrigued by the Max von Sydow character to the point that I even sought out like a fedora that's kind of like the one he wears in this, which is kind of it's not a Humphrey Bogart style. It's a little different. It's a little more daddish. I don't know how to put it, but I was really into it. And it made me think of how I heard some interview or read something with Tarantino years and years ago where he was talking about seeing Chow Yun-fat in a bunch of the Hong Kong action movies and then going out and getting a long duster overcoat and walking around with a toothpick in his mouth, which is a cool thing to do. I was trying to pull off a fedora that I couldn't really pull off. But anyway, that's just how much I was into this movie. And I think it's interesting, too, because it ties into and sort of is a predecessor to Sneakers, which is a very popular film these days, has a really strong cult following, is also about paranoia and secrets and too many secrets, if you will. But I think sometimes people forget about this, like there's the whole Conversation and Enemy of the State, where you actually have Gene Hackman playing kind of the same guy in both movies. And this isn't exactly that, but I do think it's interesting that Robert Redford is in both films and that this one is maybe a little less known than Sneakers, but deserves a higher profile because it's a great paranoid thriller. It's about a guy played by Redford who works for the CIA in a very special book reading division. And apparently it was made up, but was something that then became a thing. Like the CIA actually did this. But so anyway, they would read books and literature and all kinds of stuff to try and tie it into potential plots or things that spies could use or whatever. I don't fully understand exactly what they're doing when they're reading, but he works in this little office in New York, and one day he goes out to get us some sandwiches, and, because he's not seen, he goes out the back. The folks that come in and basically wipe the entire place out don't get him. And so then he is on the run and totally scared and calling Cliff Robertson to say, hey, what do I do? And then realizing, wait, I don't know you. I don't know my section chief. I'm not going to meet anybody. And ends up taking a hostage in Faye Dunaway and they sort of hit it off, which is one of those tricky romances. You believe you could be kidnapped by somebody and fall for them, Stockholm Syndrome or whatever. But it's a really solid thriller, and it's well done, and I really enjoy it. It's set in New York City and thereabouts, and I was really happy to see this 4K come out. Now, I had a German 4K, and I don't know the difference. This is said to be a brand new HDR Dolby Vision master from a 4K scan of the 35 original camera negative. So this might be the better one. It was a French Blu-ray that I had, I think, 4K. But this has all the features and then some. It has an audio commentary with Sidney Pollack, which is really interesting, if a bit sparse. And I don't mind that with certain directors, that they either get caught up in watching the movie or whatever, and so their comments are not wall-to-wall. But he definitely points out some details that I hadn't picked up previously and talks about the CIA, and I won't give away what the conspiracy is all about, because you really don't find that out until the end. But again, that was speculation at the time and later became reality. So there's a prescient quality to this movie. It's based on a book called, I think, 6 Days of the Condor, and they definitely took some liberties with adapting it. They added and changed some things, I think probably for the better. I haven't read the book, but based on what I've heard, it sounds like this is the story I would prefer to see. But anyway, solid commentary from him. And then we also get an audio commentary from Nathaniel Thompson and Steve Mitchell. I always enjoy these two. They talk a lot of background on the film, including the original novel, some casting choices that didn't happen. Steve Mitchell was living in New York City at the time of this while it was being shot, and even witnessed one of the scenes being filmed. So it's neat to hear sort of his recollections of the movie. And it's definitely an enjoyable track that I totally dug. And beyond that, we get a few more things which are kind of neat. I think they're from a French release, because they have, if I'm remembering, they have French like titles or something, but they're in English. One is called Something About Sidney Pollack. It's a 2004 documentary. It's about an hour long, and it includes an interview with Pollack, I think circa 2003, when he seems to be working on what would become The Interpreter. But he talks about a range of things from, how he got started doing plays in high school, to his love of New York City, to general ideas about filmmaking and beyond. He talks about being brought on by John Frankenheimer to help with young actors in The Young Savages, and that's where he met Burt Lancaster for the first time, who encouraged him to become a director, because he said, you know more about acting than most directors. And Lancaster encountered a lot who he said as directors were more technicians than, people who could work with actors. And the doc also goes through his films and includes an interview with Robert Redford as well, which is cool. It's kind of cutting back and forth with them because they work together a bit, and so it's a relevant thing. And then same interviews, at least the same sit down, not necessarily the same content. Another featurette called More About the Condor, that's about 25 minutes and includes those Pollack and Redford interviews. And it's neat to hear them talk about developing the script off the book and changing some things about it and how they made some things up. And again, some of this is covered in the commentary, but I think it's a little more in depth about what they changed. I would recommend watching this after the movie, and what was later revealed to be true and stuff like that. So it's a really solid, enjoyable, documentary, and I dug it. I definitely dug it. So that is 3 Days of the Condor, a really worthwhile and nice 4K release from Kino. Then we'll move on to some Westerns. This is Audie Murphy Collection Volume 3, and this is, I think, probably my favorite of the collections they've done so far of his, in part because these are some really enjoyable movies. It includes Hellbent for Leather, Posse from Hell, and Showdown. And I just happen to have seen both Hellbent for Leather and Posse from Hell as part of my duties recording the New Beverly Calendar episodes for Pure Cinema, because we covered these. They featured these two films at the New Beverly. I believe they're Tarantino favorites. I know he's an Audie Murphy fan, and these are two of the best ones of his that I've seen. I think beyond No Name on the Bullet and Ride Clear of Diablo, which I've mentioned on the channel before, those are my two favorite Audie Westerns, but these are right up there. So we'll start with Hellbent for Leather, which stars him and Felicia Farr and Stephen McNally. I think I remember this being my favorite of the two. It says the only man who could save his life was the man who wanted him dead. Clay Santel, Audie Murphy, stops in the town of Sutterville after having his horse stolen. Oh yeah, this is a good one. Yeah, I like this. Only to be mistaken by the town folks for a murderous outlaw named Travers. Sutterville's residents capture Santel and turn him over to crooked lawman Harry Deckett, Stephen McNally, who, tired of chasing the real Travers, decides to execute the innocent man instead. But Santel pulls off a cunning escape and takes the lovely Janet Gifford, Felicia Farr, hostage until he can prove his innocence. Galloping CinemaScope Western directed by George Sherman, with an audio commentary by film historian Toby Rohn, who I'm a fan of, a great 50 Westerns from the 50s or 50s Westerns. He has a good blog. But yeah, this one's really solid. Like, he gets his horse stolen at the beginning, and he's able to wing the guy, and the guy drops his sawed-off shotgun, which is like a real signature weapon, and that's what gets him ID'd as the criminal when he comes into the new town. And he, it's a bummer. There's no carrying ID with you back in the West. So if you're carrying some bad guy's shotgun, you are that guy. And so it's really neat to see him and how he deals with this crooked sheriff, because he's basically got nobody that can corroborate he's not the guy except that sheriff, who's not going to do it. And so he just has to convince other people. He's able maybe to convince Felicia Farr, and it's really solid. Like, I really like this one a lot. It's probably my favorite, like I said, in this group. Then we have Posse from Hell. Like, these are not easy to see. Like, to track these down, I think I had to get import release DVDs, and so it's really nice that they're getting these Blu-rays. This one has John Saxon in it, which is cool, and a really great but less sort of underused Vic Morrow, who's like the villain. I think my only issue with this one is that it starts with a really great scene setting up Vic Morrow, and then we're following the posse and not seeing what Morrow's doing for a really long time. And the posse's cool, but they're kind of inexperienced and stuff, and the Vic Morrow is so good, and you don't see him again till the end. Spoiler a little bit, but anyway, together they team up as an avenging posse from hell. Audie Murphy and John Saxon are two steel-nerved, two-fisted men who take apart a gang of gun-mad killers in Posse from Hell. 4 escapees from death row, Crip, Leo, Chunk, and Hash, ride into the town of Paradise, enter the Rosebud Saloon, and unleash hell. That's Vic Morrow and his gang. Let's see here. Banner Cole Murphy is the tough sheriff's deputy tasked with forming a posse to take down the quartet of killers who fled Paradise with a hostage. Directed by Alfred Hitchcock's frequent producer and assistant director Herbert Coleman, the film features a fiery cast of co-stars including Zora Lampert, who was in Let's Scare Jessica to Death. She's very young in this, in an intense part. Vic Morrow, Robert Keith, Rudolph Acosta, Royal Dano, Ward Ramsey, and Lee Van Cleef, also in this, which is cool. And this has an audio commentary by author-screenwriter C. Courtney Joyner and film historian Henry Park, which I'm very much looking forward to checking out. But again, this is a Blu-ray debut as far as I know. It's only ever been on DVD, and a really enjoyable Audie Murphy Western. And then Showdown, I'm not sure if I've seen or not. There's a few Westerns called Showdown. Hellbent for Leather's 60, Posse from Hell is 61, and this is 63. These are two color Westerns, both one's 235-1, that's Hellbent for Leather, and one's 185. And this is a 185 black and white Western from 1963. This is Showdown. Enemies chained together like mad dogs. Audie Murphy stars with Kathleen Crowley and Charles Drake, who was also in No Name on the Bullet, which has come out. I believe, on Blu-ray from Kino at some point. In a Western about two cowboys who find themselves in deep trouble, chained up and in iron collars. Chris Foster Murphy and Burt Drake manage to escape their iron shackles with a gang of villains headed by Lavelle, Harold J. Stone. But when they tumble into a scheme involving $12,000 in stolen bonds and an ex-girlfriend, Crowley, of Burt's, a final showdown explodes between Lavelle and the two men. Western favorites Skip Homeyer, big fan of him, L.Q. Jones, very nice, and Strother Martin. Wow, all right, you got my attention. Also stars in this rousing gang adventure directed by R.G. Springsteen. Just a trailer on this one, but that's a heck of a supporting cast. Some really great character actors, so I'm putting this on the top of my watch list now. But yeah, very exciting Audie Murphy Volume 3 collection. So that's some good stuff right there. Okay, next up we have Malone. This is a Burt Reynolds movie. This has been issued on Blu-ray previously by Kino. It is now in a slipcase edition. I'm not sure if the other version went out of print. But I don't think it had the audio commentary with Steve Mitchell and Nathaniel Thompson, so that's a nice addition for the re-release. This is a very enjoyable Burt movie. It's, in that sort of Charles Bronson-y, revenge-y, tough guy trying to get out of the life, gets pulled back in kind of story. And we'll talk about Bronson in a minute, by the way. Ex-cop, ex-CIA, explosive. Screen legend Burt Reynolds is back as Richard Malone, an ex-CIA agent looking to leave his past behind him and start a new life in the Pacific Northwest, but his dreams of living the quiet life soon go up in smoke when he stumbles onto a military conspiracy led by a local millionaire and right-wing zealot played by to sinister perfection by Cliff Robertson, coming back to Cliff Robertson from 3 Days of the Condor. He's not necessarily a good guy in that, and he's definitely not a good guy in this. Add Lauren Hutton as Malone's partner, ex-partner and lover. Her next CIA assignment is to snuff Malone. Harley Cokeless, Battle Truck, Black Moon Rising, wonderfully directs this fast-paced adventure yarn filled with suspense and thrills. The stellar cast includes Cynthia Gibb, who I'm a huge fan of, from Modern Girls. That is her penultimate for me, or her best stuff. And then Youngblood, which she's also really good in, which they put out on Blu-ray. Kenneth McMillan is in this, Tracy Walter, and Scott Wilson. So this is a really solid... This is like one of the better latter Burts. And Malone is a great name that sounds wonderful when you yell it. Malone! It's just like that kind of a name. And, you got a great shot of him walking away from an explosion, which I believe actually happens in the movie. So very enjoyable stuff. Definitely worth your time. Up there with, Heat, but not quite. I don't like it quite as much as I like Heat, but, Heat came out from Kino not too long ago. They're doing right by the latter-day Burt, and this is a really strong one. So that's Malone from 1987. Then we're into Bronson territory. Here we go. So we got Death Wish 4, The Crackdown. One of my favorite sequel tags, The Crackdown is one, if Electric Boogaloo is overused, The Crackdown is underused. If you want to talk about a sequel of something, say The Crackdown. But yeah, so this follows Death Wish 3, which is my favorite Death Wish movie. But I've heard some people say that Death Wish 4 is actually their favorite of the whole series, and it's solid, so I get it. Directed by J. Lee Thompson, not Michael Winner, but J. Lee Thompson collaborated with Bronson a ton, so it's an enjoyable one. The Vigilante is back with a vengeance. Superstar Charles Bronson blows the drug underworld wide open in a blazing quest for justice and revenge in Death Wish 4, The Crackdown. Haunted by his violent past, Paul Kersey struggles to forget the brutal deaths of his loved ones, many loved ones by this point, and his obsessive one-man battle to avenge their murders. But when a dose of toxic crack kills the young daughter of his new girlfriend, Kay Lenz, who's great in this, Kersey again becomes the infamous urban vigilante. Vowing to wipe out the entire cocaine network of L.A., he skillfully lures two vicious competing drug empires into a bloody turf war. But there's a sinister force behind the scenes, John P. Ryan. I think, if I remember, John P. Ryan's got all white hair in this, and is just primo, just really good villainous John P. with his own diabolical plans for Kersey in this powerhouse action thriller, which marks the 7th team-up between Bronson and legendary director J. Lee Thompson. They also did The White Buffalo and Murphy's Law together, apparently. And this, of course, includes a commentary from film historian Paul Talbot, author of the Bronson's Loose books, multiple books. And I've talked about Talbot before. He's a New York guy, got a very New York-sounding voice and accent, but knows a lot about Bronson, knows a lot about supporting casts and the production, and is always the right guy for a Bronson release. Like, he's the one you want. He's really proved himself, and I look forward to hearing his thoughts on Death Wish 4. Very cool to get this on Blu-ray. I feel like this has been released before, but this commentary might be new, but I could be also wrong. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I have this somewhere, but anyway. Then we have Death Wish 5, and this is not directed by J. Lee Thompson, and I don't remember this one as well. This one's been a minute since I've seen it. This is Death Wish 4 is from 87, just like Malone. Death Wish 5 doesn't come till 94, so several years later. It is written and directed by Alan A. Goldstein. Don't know you. No judge, no jury, no appeals, no deals. Superstar Charles Bronson returns for his final appearance as the iconic dealer of death, Paul Kersey, in Death Wish 5, The Face of Death. After battling on the streets and cities from coast to coast, vigilante, that's right, he goes from New York to LA, he's all over the place. Vigilante Paul Kersey has moved back to New York, but when his beautiful fiancée Olivia, this is Leslie Ann Down, is killed and her daughter is kidnapped by a kingpin of the underworld. Man, just the moral of the story is don't date Paul Kersey. Don't get involved with him. It's bad news. Kidnapped by a kingpin of the underworld, Kersey finds himself back in the war. Kersey's plan to live anonymously is shattered when he learns his fiancée was the victim of a protection racket run by her ex-husband, the psychotic Tommy O'Shea, played by Michael Parks. Wow, I forgot Michael Parks was in this. Bonus. Nice. One by one, Kersey hunts down the criminals. Once again, upholding the law becomes his way of life. And this time, in the ultimate take no prisoners Death Wish, it's for good. Very cool. I forgot about Michael Parks. Saul Rubinek, I guess, is in this too. Very nice. Audio commentary by Paul Talbot. So we get to hear his thoughts and get some behind the scenes and all kinds of good stuff from him on Death Wish 5. In a nice slipcase edition, as is Death Wish 4. All right. We'll just do one more here. We have After Dark, My Sweet. Now this also has come out previously as part of the first or second neo-noir box set from Imprint Films. So it's gotten a release before, but this might be the U.S. premiere. And it says it's a brand new HD master from a 2K scan of the Inner Positive, and that may be different than the After Dark, My Sweet of the neo-noir set. So that could be a reason to get this one. Jason Patric stars in this mesmerizing neo-noir thriller of the erotic tensions that explode into violence when a kidnapping goes wrong. Kali, that's Jason Patric, is an ex-boxer who seems to be the perfect pawn to pull off a kidnapping planned by a sexy widow, and that is Rachel Ward, and a cop turned con man, Bruce Dern, who's really good in this. What they don't know is that Kali is an escapee from a mental institution. When he realizes the woman he loves has been manipulating him, Kali turns the tables, playing a game of deceit and raw desire that can only end in death. Based on the hard-boiled book by Jim Thompson, The Getaway and the Grifters, and directed by James Foley, who's really solid, who did At Close Range and Glengarry Glen Ross. After Dark, My Sweet remains one of the purest and most uncompromising of modern films noir. And Jason Patric's really good in this. He takes on a character that is not that bright, and he has a physical way that he's sort of hunched over. He really changes his physicality for this role, and it was a role that he was, I think, hugely acclaimed for. I think it might have gotten him, because this comes out in 90, I think it got him Rush with Jennifer Jason Leigh. Like, he tells a story either in one of the interviews on the imprint disc, I can't remember, about people seeing this movie and really responding to it and him getting attention because of it. And it's just a well-directed neo-noir. Bruce Dern is great. I won't go into his character or how he plays into it, but he's solid. He's solid stuff. Definitely worth your time. This one has an audio commentary by James Foley, which I think was on the imprint disc. Primal Precipice, interview with actor Jason Patric, and Call Me Uncle Bud, interview with actor Bruce Dern. I don't know if these are the same interviews from the imprint disc, but I think those had interviews with those actors, and they were good. I'm going to assume that they probably are the same. But regardless, Jason Patric really likes this movie, and so he has a lot of positive and interesting things to say about it. But regardless, again, just a great neo-noir, one of the better ones out there, and certainly underseen and underappreciated in the world of neo-noir. So definitely worth picking up. And that will do it for this round of Kino titles. Always lots of good stuff coming out of Kino, and they've been running sales lately, so definitely keep an eye on their socials to keep up to date for when those sales start, when they end, what titles have been added, etc., etc. KinoLorber.com. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.